Life is a journey of exploration, learning, and growth. Basically, the world is full of fascinating stuff. Join me, Aristides Marousas, as I uncover interesting facts and discuss big ideas on Stuff Explained from the Motley Experience. Experience your world. Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Stuff Explained. In this episode, I'm going to tackle a very popular vegetable, or is it a fruit, item, the tomato. And I know that may throw some of you off why dedicate a whole episode to tomatoes, but trust me, when I started digging into this, I was astounded by what the story of tomatoes was and how it turned out that this fruit, or is it a vegetable, became what it's known as today. So this episode is dedicated to the history, to the travels of the ever reliable, ever delicious tomato. So tomatoes originated around the area that is current-day Peru, and wild tomatoes can still be found in the Andes. The plant then migrated northwards towards Mexico. So this alone was surprising to me. I'd heard a few years ago that tomatoes actually originated in South America. Didn't really know much else beyond that, didn't know the exact details of it. I had always kind of assumed that they were a South European native plant, just because of how prominent they are in Italian cuisine, even in Greek cuisine, and just really in general, all the sauces of those areas are very heavily tomato based. So it surprised me to find that not only did they in fact come from South America, but they originated in Peru. And the first known cultivation of tomatoes was by the Aztecs and Incas around 700 AD. Now, these tomatoes were a little bit different from what we know today. They were yellow, small, about the size of modern-day cherry tomatoes, and they were used for making pastes mixed with spices. The name tomato actually comes from the Nahuatl, which was the language of the Aztec people, name tomatl. So tomatoes made their way to Europe in the 16th century after Spanish conquistadors brought back seeds from their exploits and exploration. Hernan Cortez is usually given credit as a conquistador to have decided to bring back seeds after encountering tomatoes in the sacked Aztec city of Tenochtitlan. So the sharing of tomatoes was one of the few positives to come out of the conquest of that area, because the rest was a lot of bad stuff. The tomato, however, had a difficult time integrating into European society, and this was because it was widely believed to be poisonous, based on its similarity to the poisonous nightshade plant. In fact, tomatoes do belong to the same family as nightshade and wolfsbane, which can be fatally poisonous. Tomatoes aren't the only edible members of that family, and they're joined by potatoes, chili peppers, and eggplants. The perception of tomatoes being poisonous was compounded by what would occur when they were eaten off of pewter plates, and these types of plates were especially popular amongst the wealthy during this period of time. So pewter plates have a high lead content, and when tomatoes, which are high in acidity, are placed on these plates, the lead is leached out into the tomatoes, and there's a discoloration, but more importantly, the tomatoes now basically hold lead. And so when these tomatoes are consumed, guess what happens? Lead poisoning. So it took a very long time for people to realize that it wasn't the tomato that was causing the poisoning, but this chemical reaction between the acidity in the tomato and the lead in the pewter plates. So because of all this, tomatoes were used by the wealthy nobility. However, they were used as tabletop decorations. And they would actually grow tomato vines, so the vines themselves would be sort of outside decorations, and the fruits would then be used as these tabletop decorations. And so tomatoes were grown and experimented on with selective breeding to produce this variety of colors and shapes, but again, it was all for decoration, which to me is mind-boggling, to think that they were solely grown for that purpose. But tomatoes were eaten by commoners because their tableware was mostly made out of wood, so there was no fear of being poisoned. And so tomatoes gained popularity in southern European countries like Spain and Italy, but they would not become popular as a food item in most of Europe and even the American colonies until the 19th century because of this false narrative that they were poisonous, though they were still admired for their beauty and, again, used as decoration. Stay up to date on all the latest content and announcements from The Motley Experience by visiting themotleyexperience.com/connect. Then enter your email address and become a member of the Insider Weekly newsletter. Experience your world. Retcon Industries provides tailor-made music for professional wrestling, podcasts, trailers, and more, while also releasing their own original music. I personally have used Retcon Industries for professional wrestling and also for this podcast. All the music you hear in this podcast is by Retcon Industries. For more information, go to www.retconindustries.com or email my good friend Greg at retcongreg@gmail.com. You can also visit them on Facebook and Instagram at Retcon Industries. Appreciation for the culinary uses of tomatoes began to grow in the early to mid 19th century. Part of this might be explained by the influx of immigrants from Europe, particularly Italy, who brought with them these recipes that included the use of tomatoes pretty heavily. This was also around the time that industrialization made canned foods very popular, and it was found that tomatoes kept well when canned. And so the spread and popularity of ketchup, which was a fairly new item around that time, and also Campbell's condensed tomato soup helped cement the tomato's place in America's kitchens. An ongoing debate about tomatoes is whether they are fruits or vegetables, and I alluded to this in the opening of the show. The issue even made it to the Supreme Court in 1893. Yeah, that's right. Whether tomatoes are fruits or vegetables was a Supreme Court topic. So in 1887, the U.S. imposed a 10% tariff on vegetables, but not fruit. So a tomato importer actually ended up suing a New York tax collector with the argument that tomatoes were fruits, so they should be exempt. Makes sense, seems fair. But then in the 1893 U.S. Supreme Court decision, Justice Gray wrote, and this is a quote, "Botanically speaking, tomatoes are fruits of a vine, just as are cucumbers, squashes, beans, and peas. But in the common language of the people, all these are vegetables, which, whether eaten cooked or raw, are usually served at dinner, in, with, or after the soup, fish, or meats, which constitute the principal part of the repast, and not, like fruits generally, as dessert." So this was basically all coming down to the technicality that because people commonly refer to them as vegetables, even though they were scientifically speaking fruits, they would then be, almost like officially classified as vegetables, which did happen, and tomatoes were taxed. Today, tomatoes are available in so many different varieties like Roma, heirlooms, Jersey, cherry, and many, many, many more. More than 1.5 billion tons of tomatoes are produced commercially every single year. And a quick fun fact that I learned in addition to this is that usually when you grow tomatoes at home, you do it only for the one season. But actually, if you bring the tomato plant indoors, you can nurse it throughout the wintertime, or if you're in a better climate, keep it outdoors, and you can get at least one more season out of it. So originally, tomato plants were basically long-lasting plants. They didn't expire after one season, which I thought was interesting. So there you have it. So quick and dirty episode on the history of tomatoes. I hope this fascinated you as much as it did to me. It might sound silly at first. I'm sure when you saw the title Tomatoes, you were a little bit skeptical, but after listening, I hope you can see why I found this to be worthy enough of having an episode. It's quite interesting how today we take tomatoes for granted when a little bit over a century ago, people were scared to eat them because they thought they'd be poisoned. Pretty crazy. And also having started in South America and moved their way up to Central America, it took tomatoes the long way around to actually make it to the United States. It had to go to Europe first before coming to the American colonies, and then the United States of America, the nation. Meanwhile, it was just south of the border being used. Interesting stuff. So actually head on over to themotleyexperience.com. I post all my podcasts up there. They're also available on all major streaming platforms. But if you go to the website, again, themotleyexperience.com, and you click on the post of each episode, you can find links that I used as my sources for each and every episode. So if you're interested in this or on past episodes to do a bit more, that would be a great starting point using those links that I provide. So go on over and do that. Also, feel free to tweet me at Motley Experience. That's MOTLEYXPERIENCE. Same on Instagram. On Twitter, use the hashtag StuffExplained. Give me your thoughts, opinions on this episode, prior episodes. Let's get some conversation going. And if you have any great recipes for tomatoes, share that as well. Thanks for listening and have a fantastic week. Stuff Explained is written and produced by me, Aristides Marousas. Music is produced by the talented Greg Massey of Retcon Industries. Visit themotleyexperience.com for more thoughtful original content, and you can also find links to the sources used for each episode of Stuff Explained. Like us on Facebook at The Motley Experience, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Motley Experience, and use the hashtag Stuff Explained. If you like this episode, leave a review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thank you for listening.